Before we create our code pipeline, we need to have a repository that the code pipeline can connect to, which will contain our code and what our developers can use to push all of their updated code to, and our code pipeline will grab that and then deploy it out to our environment that was created with the Elastic Beanstalk. So we need to go to github.com, and if we don't already have a GitHub account, we need to create one. And then we need to sign in, obviously. Once we've signed into our GitHub account, we can then go into here up the top and click on the plus sign, create a new repository. We need to give this repository a name. We'll make it a private repository. And we need to make sure that we initialize this repository with a README. The reason I say that is that when it creates that repository, we can just go to that repository, and because there's already a file there, we can just go and upload our files that we need, and they will be automatically just imported just by drag and drop into our repository. And that'll be self-explanatory as we go along. We just click on Create Repository. And there we have, we've created our repository. So I just need to grab the code that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to jump back into the Elastic Beanstalk console, go into the BackSpace intro application, go into application versions. I'll click on this sample application, and it'll take me to the documentation where that belongs. I scroll down to the bottom here, and I can download my Node.js sample application that is deployed. Then we can unzip that. And then what we want to do is get our index.html file that is inside that, and we're going to edit that. Okay, so I've unzipped that file, and I've now opened up the index.html file within that folder, within that archive. We need to scroll down to line 38, and we can see here we've got the background color for that text column. So it's currently a green color, and we're going to change that to magenta. And then we'll save that. Once we've saved that file, we can now upload it to or we can upload all of the files to our Git repository. So what we do is we go to our repository page, and then we just grab all these files and we just drop them onto the page, and it'll import those for us. And then we can see it's brought those in for us. We just need to give it some comments for our commit. And then we can commit our changes. And there we can see our application has uploaded to this repository. And we can see there, it's the comment there, added Magento background application, everything is fine. What we need to do now is we need to go into the AWS CodePipeline console to create a pipeline between this repository and our environment that we created in Elastic Beanstalk. Back in the Elastic Beanstalk console, I'm going to jump into the CodePipeline console. So we go to Services, we go to Developer Tools, CodePipeline. I'm just going to open that in a new tab because I want to keep this screen on Elastic Beanstalk still there. If we don't have any pipelines created, we will have the welcome screen here. Let's get started. Give our pipeline a name. We'll click on the next step. We need to provide a source location that will be our GitHub repository. So we select GitHub. We've also got some other options there. We've got Amazon S3, and we've also got AWS Code Commit. Now, AWS Code Commit is another Git server like GitHub. So if you don't want to use GitHub and you want to keep everything on AWS, you can use the AWS Code Commit service. Be aware though, it's not available on all regions at this point, but it will eventually be on all regions, I'm sure. So we'll leave it with GitHub. What we need to do is we need to create a authorization for AWS to connect to our GitHub account because it is a private repository. So we do connect to GitHub. We'll put in our repository. And we select master for the branch. We don't need to change anything else, but we just have a look at advanced to see the options that are available there. So we can actually run our pipeline when changes in the source content are detected. So when our GitHub repository changes, the pipeline will automatically push those changes to our Elastic Beanstalk environment. And that's what we want. So let's click on the next step. So with our continuous integration and continuous deployment environment, we can also create a build stage. We don't need that. We're just going to have a Node.js application that is going to be ready to go and push straight to the environment. We don't need to have a build process as such. But if we had, for example, a big Java application, we would need to build that and then deploy that after it's been built. We don't need to do that. So we just don't leave it empty, but we put in no build. And then we go to next step. Our deployment provider, that will be Elastic Beanstalk. We put in our application name and our environment name, which we created in Elastic Beanstalk, and we click on next. Now we need to create a role to give the AWS CodePipeline service permission to access our resources that were created with Elastic Beanstalk. So we don't have a role set up as yet, so we need to create a role. So click on Create Role. It'll jump us into the IAM management console, and what it's done is it's already created this for us. All we need to do is just click on Allow. So it's create a new IAM role, and the role name is there, and we can also see the policy document there if we want to have a look at it. But we'll take AWS's word for it and think that it's right. So we just click on Allow, and that's successful. So it will send us back to the pipeline screen. So there we can see we've got our role name in there now, and we click on the next step. We review our pipeline, looks fine to me, and we create that pipeline. And there we can see the pipeline creation process has started, and we can view our progress by looking at below, and we can see here that it has now just succeeded in bringing our code from the GitHub repository, and it has now pushed that out to staging, and AWS Elastic Beanstalk now has control of it, and it will be deploying it to our Elastic Beanstalk environment, to all those EC2 instances. And we can see that it's just in progress, and after a certain amount of time, it will change from in progress to being successful. And after a few minutes, we'll have our staging process will be changing to succeeded in green there. What we can do now is that we can jump back into the Elastic Beanstalk console, go back to where our application versions are. We click on refresh. Oh, look at that. We have an update that has been pushed in from CodePipeline. So we can now go back into our environment, into our BackSpace intro environment. Let's go back to this URL. And we should see, look at that, we have our magenta background there on our application. So let's just do one more update, and we're going to update the GitHub repository and see if that gets pushed through automatically when we do that update. So let's jump into GitHub, go back to where our repository is. We'll click on our index.html. We'll edit it, so we click on the Edit This File button on the right-hand side there. We'll again scroll down to 38, and we're going to change that magenta to orange. And then we scroll down to the bottom. We put in a commit message. And we commit that change. And there we can see on 38, we've had that change committed in there. So what should happen now is that should get picked up by the CodePipeline service. It will be monitoring changes to this repository, and then it will automatically push that change over to the Elastic Beanstalk environment, and then Elastic Beanstalk will update all of its environment with that new code. So let's have a look and see if that's working. So we'll just jump into AWS CodePipeline. And there we can see source GitHub is in progress. So the source has changed, it's pulling that in, and it will eventually change to succeeded, and then it'll go into staging, and again it'll change into succeeded when that goes and gets completed, and then we can jump into Elastic Beanstalk and see our change actually occur. And there it's now pulled that source in from GitHub, and it's now pushing it out through to the staging environment in Elastic Beanstalk. It's stating in progress. That will change to succeeded, and then we can see our application up and running, hopefully. Okay, and again, after a few minutes, we have our staging is now succeeded. Let's jump back into Elastic Beanstalk and see what's going on there. So we go back to our BackSpace intro. We go to application versions, and there we can see we have another version that has been created that's pulled in from that repository, and it has been deployed to our environment. Let's go to our environment and have a look. We'll click on that URL, and there we have it. There is our orange application. If we didn't want orange and we wanted to go back to magenta, we can just go back into our BackSpace intro application, application versions, click on this one here, which is our magenta version, and we just deploy that. And we go to the events page. So after, again, a certain amount of time, we can see that our environment update has completed successfully. Again, we click on our URL and have a look at it. And there is our magenta application. Normally, if you made a mistake or you wanted to change back and go back to a version, you would do it in your GitHub repository. But just say, for example, you deployed this and you go, oh my God, it's got something disastrous happening, and you want to quickly go back to your original environment, then that's the quickest way to do it, is go back into Elastic Beanstalk and select the next version, and then go into your GitHub repository and make your changes and then redeploy. And again, there is also a build and test component of Code Deploy, which you can use, and I thoroughly recommend you look into that, because it's a very good idea to have a testing process between your deployment, and that can integrate with Jenkins, or if you've got Jenkins and you've got Mocha and Chai and all this sort of stuff that's really great for testing, you can have that before you deploy from your GitHub repository out to this deployment environment. So that brings us to the end of the lab. Grab your lab notes, do this yourself, and then at the end of it, make sure that you go through the process of cleaning up all of this environment, because it's going to be a highly available environment. It'll be an expensive environment. It'll have multiple EC2 instances, it'll have a load balancer. Make sure you get rid of all of that when you're finished with it. I'll see you in the next lecture.